There is a story happening in a house on your street. You see the family at church, at the grocery store, at school pickup. You see a portrait of a normal life. But often, the most dangerous stories are the ones we can't see. The ones that unfold in the quiet spaces, just below the surface. This is Peace Interrupted. Season 1, Sarah's story, is brought to you by The Journey and the Process.
You know, we talk a lot about the hard stuff, trauma, abuse, and the toll that it takes on your mind, body, and spirit. And we want you to know you don't have to walk that alone. The Journey and the Process is a trauma-specialized counseling center committed to helping individuals heal from deep wounds through clinically excellent, biblically grounded care. With offices in North Carolina and Texas, telehealth services across 5 states, and biblical counseling available globally, our team of highly trained Christian therapists and certified biblical counselors integrate faith and whole person, evidence-based practices to address trauma at its root. We believe that healing is possible because Jesus still sets the captives free. If you're ready to take that next step toward peace, visit www.thejourneyandtheprocess.com. Trauma doesn't have to eat your lunch forever. There is hope, and we are here to help you find it.
Welcome, friends, to Peace Interrupted. I'm your host, Chris Moles. I'm a pastor and biblical counselor, and I've been working in this field for quite some time, and I'm really excited to take a look at Sarah's story with a friend. And that friend today is Greg Wilson. Greg is a counselor and an author. He's a co-author of When Home Hurts, and he has worked many years, as I have, addressing abuse through the lens of talking with perpetrators. Greg, welcome to Peace Interrupted.
Man, I'm glad to be here. It's exciting.
Brother, if you would you fill us in a little bit more about what you do and how long the Lord's been using you in this work, and then just a little bit of general reaction to Sarah's story.
Yeah, so you hit the high points pretty well. Here in Texas, I'm a licensed counselor. I do see lots of different populations. I think if I only saw this population, my longevity in counseling probably wouldn't be super high, or super long. But yeah, I certainly part of that is domestic abuse. I do see a few survivors, victims. I do some trauma work, which I think helps in the perpetrator work, and then I do work with abusive individuals as well, and I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And man, I told you, privately when I listened to this episode, this is just so kind of typical, right, of a lot of situations that we see. I really resonated with the line, and this was in your introduction, so it may be a line that's used in other episodes as well, but often the most dangerous stories are the ones we can't see.
Yeah.
That really resonated with me because I think, if you look at Sarah and Mark, they're just a sweet, high school couple, college couple.
Yeah.
He's a leader in the church youth group. He's seen as a responsible guy that has his own car, went to a
Right.
Christian college, just looks so perfect on the outside. Chloe even makes the remark that she and her parents were just starstruck by him.
Right.
And I
Right.
think a lot of people were. Sarah was starstruck by him. And that is a lot of times that's a place where, if I could just throw in this word of warning from someone who's worked with this population for a while. I mean, when that happens, look, everybody's got their stuff. Everybody's got their side that's, not as, well put together
Right.
and all that. And if someone is looking like they are just the perfect person, that's definitely a place to ask more questions. I'm not saying that you won't end up getting married and having a long, healthy marriage and no destructive features at all in that. But it's definitely like you should be asking questions about, hey, like what kind of stuff makes you angry?
Yeah,
Like what kind of things do you deal with? And those kinds of things, just to sort of get beneath the surface a little bit. There were warning signs that we
sure,
see.
sure.
I think especially about when when he showed up at the theater when
Yeah,
they were going to have a girls' night at the theater. Man,
yeah.
we've seen that, haven't we?
We have, and I think the interesting thing about that scene, Greg, is Chloe's gut is telling her something's not right, but
That's
she
right.
doesn't have the language or experience
That's
to
right.
see it. It's something that only hindsight's going to give her. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that is so prevalent in our work. Victims and bystanders taking this guilt as if they should have put the pieces together, when really it's a pattern of
Right.
control. This is early on in the process.
Oh
He's
yeah.
establishing those hooks, that pattern of control. And of course, you can't see it until all the stars are in the night sky or all the cars on the train have rolled by.
That's right. There's the examples of like him speaking for her,
Sure.
you know, and Chloe not being able to get her sister alone, even
Right.
for her sister's 30th birthday.
Yeah.
And of course the locket and the gift card at
Right.
work. I mean, there's so many signs that we're seeing, and we're actually watching it escalate
Yeah.
until we get to that point of no return, so to speak, that we
Yeah.
saw.
I think that was the when we were writing Sarah's story, and our listeners, if you're new to this conversation, Sarah's story is a composite narrative, and so our goal was to encapsulate coercive control. And coercive control is the concept and the issue that Greg and I deal with most often, and it's a
Right.
pattern of behavior. And that's really what Greg is pulling the thread on. Sarah's story shows us when you take a step back and you see all the stars in the constellation, abuse is really a pattern of
Mhm.
coercive control. Hey, buddy, I'd love to cue up part of Sarah's story to get your
Yeah.
reaction on and to talk about, because abusers, they're masters of they're constructing their own world, their
Mhm.
justifications, their minimizations, their blame shifting. I'd like to play. This is going to be cue number one from Sarah's story to give us a little indicator of Mark's perspective, and then I'll follow up with a question on how you and I might address this in a therapeutic or group setting.
Sounds good.
He twisted my gesture of love into something that would be a burden for her. I hung up the phone and burst into tears. I was somehow feeling welcome and shut out at the same time. He was building a wall around her, and the bricks he used were love, faith, and concern.
So the bricks he used was love, faith, and concern. Can you describe what's happening here a little bit, Greg, and then we'll come back and talk about how we might address it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, he's feigning love, faith, and concern, right? For sure. Like, and here's the thing. I think you and I have talked about this a lot in the work that we've done together. Um, the reality is that there are guys who really believe that the things that they're doing are loving, and the things that they're doing are faithful, and the things that they're doing are out of concern. He may have legitimately believed in some way that he was what was best for Sarah in every situation, and that she didn't really need to be around all these other people. And they create, um, you know, uh, uh, some attitudes perhaps that he doesn't like, or some things that he doesn't particularly see as Christ-like. We certainly see that in Christian homes sometimes, where there's someone who has a very contorted view of male headship and what that looks like. But you're exactly right in the way you set up the clip. What he is actually doing, whether he's able to see this or not, is that he is constructing a world for her. He is building this wall. I love that line because it's so true. Not because I don't love the dynamic, obviously, but the fact that he is like building this wall of isolation around her, and he is using what he is calling love and faith and concern to actually um, do something completely different, which is to isolate her and to create a world in which he is in really complete control. And that's where the coercive control really starts to take hold, is in the isolation.
Yeah. So if we were in a group setting or we were in a therapeutic setting, Greg, I think you and I would hone in on that terminology, isolation. We might even make an entire class or an entire session around isolation.
That's right.
You do something really well in your book, talking about corrupt perceptions and corrupt behavior. That reminds me of this as well. So let's take the concept of isolation, understanding that abusers have a corrupted perception that's informing their corrupted behavior. How might we dismantle some of this worldview, this perception issue, and introduce accountability in a group or maybe a therapeutic setting?
Yeah. So one of the reasons we really enjoy group work is because the group dynamic can really help with that.
Sure.
The group dynamic, putting things out there like the timeout, in their bedroom.
Right.
Putting things out there like that, you're going to have guys in a group who are going to say, "Oh man, you did that? You
Yeah.
did what?"
Yeah.
You
That's not
know?
appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. Some of the guys who have been in a group longer, will say, "Yeah, I've been there, brother. That's not gonna. I bet that, isn't gonna end up working out too well for you." And then, the other thing that you and I use quite a bit is the Men of Peace logs. I
Mm-hmm.
use those both in my individual work with guys and in group work, to where, like, if there actually was, like, let's just take that scenario, right? So he, quote, um, gave her a timeout. So, he might do a log in group, or even for my individual, like I have my individual clients do
Sure.
this too. He might do a log and come to either session or to group and say, yeah, there's this time that, like, I gave her a timeout. What do you mean by,
Uh-huh.
and then that pulling the rope thing. What do you
Yep.
mean by a timeout, right?
Right.
Well, I had her, I just made her stay in the bedroom for a while. You, so you treated her like a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So you imprisoned her in your bed. No, I didn't imprison her, Greg, Chris. I gave her a timeout. Yeah, but you're not her dad,
Right.
you know? And so, like, like that kind of conversation, hopefully, like in a group setting, what's going to happen is other guys are going to kind of come in and say, yeah, I mean, how old is your wife? Oh, she's about 30,
Yeah.
and you gave her a timeout
Yeah.
in her bedroom like she was a kid. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, we see the justification, we see the minimization, the blame shifting, those kinds of things that happen. At the end of the day, men like Mark need um, a redeemed view of power, position, and authority. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to be able to see somehow, and a lot of times this really is the work of the Lord and the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit ultimately to do this. Like, this isn't work that you and I can do on our own, or even with the power of a group dynamic at play. They need a redeemed view of those things, and for him to be able to see that those are not things that he can do.
Yeah.
They need a redeemed view of what it means to lead in the home and to be the head of the home.
Yeah.
And same with, like, destroying the locket. Like, she bought this for her sister. It costs, I can't remember. Do you remember what?
$27. Yeah.
$27, you know? And so I take the posture of curiosity around those things, And I like to use a lot of different terminology. So, like you noticed in what I said just a minute ago, I changed timeout to imprisonment,
Imprisonment. Yeah.
you know, and that's not obviously coincidental or, just happenstance. That's the kind of thing that I do pretty regularly in order to help him to see like there's another way of looking at this. It's an
Yeah.
exercise in perspective taking.
Hmm.
You may have seen it as a timeout. She saw it as being imprisoned in her bed.
Yeah. I love this tie-in. I think it'll be helpful for our listeners and our viewers to for us to flesh this out a little bit more. So I'm going to deviate from the hot sheet that I sent you a little bit, Greg, because this recognizing perspective is so important here. And you've done it, whether it's directly or indirectly. I want our listeners to see what Greg has done is he's taken a cue about a subtle form of isolation. We're not going to celebrate Sarah's birthday this way, right? So, Chloe, you're not going to be permitted to do A, B, C, and D. To seeing how connected it is to Mark's eventual restraint and imprisonment, as you turn, right, in the Lockett incident. So listener, see the perspective that Greg is building. The same heart that Mark had that led him to deny Chloe access to Sarah on her birthday is the same heart that led him to restraint, right, and locking that door, destroying property, and is eventually the same heart that attempts to isolate her through threats and even physical violence. It is not distinct. It is the same corrupt perception that's escalating in behavior.
That's exactly right. And, whether that corrupt perception, sometimes it comes from a false belief about themselves or the other person
Right.
or God himself. Sometimes it comes just out of this sense of entitlement, which, really the main corrupt perception, if you will, the corrupt perception that is definitional for abuse. You can have those other corrupt perceptions and not be an abuser, but entitlement is the one that, like, if entitlement is then leading to the corrupt behavior of power and
Yeah.
control, that is the abuse dynamic
Yeah.
that you're looking for. And then the other ones, things like false beliefs or past hurts that they've had, where maybe they grew up in a home where they were abused, or maybe they've got daddy issues from abandonment, or something like that. Whether they deal with a lot of just fear around certain things. Maybe Mark is just super fearful about what would happen. Maybe he
Yeah.
is like just afraid of, like, man, if Sarah and I just kind of lived in this normal world where we interact with people and
Yeah.
people come over and she's got her own access to the funds and who knows what's going to happen in that world,
Right.
and I mean, maybe there's just a sense of fear that leads to control that is like part of what, is driving him. Maybe it's some kind of neurodiversity or personality disorder, some kind of something that's more diagnosable
Yeah.
by a counselor like myself. But whatever, like, all of those at the end of the day are creating these blinders, these glasses, if you will, that are shaded uh, in corrupt perception that then leads to the corrupt behaviors, of course, of control and the other things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Wow. It reminds me of as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Or the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so that goes to the very core of the work that you and I find ourselves in, which is worldview development, accountability, education. So I want to talk a bit about repentance in that scenario. But first, I know my answer to this. After listening to Sarah's story, would you have worked with Mark as a client? And if so, up to what point would you have worked with him before
Yeah,
maybe
that's
you
a
had some
great
change?
question. So I don't think I would have ended up working with Mark for a super long time, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If they had if they had done the marriage counseling, which they ended up doing, which failed, and we know why it failed,
Right.
because he was, he was just trying to well, we'll get into that. He was
Hmm.
just trying to, create this world where, everything is her fault.
Right.
And so he was doing a lot of minimizing and denying and blame shifting, like we talked about before. But if after that they had said, hey, Mark knows that he needs to work on some things individually, that would be a key.
Yeah.
It would even be better if it was Mark saying, I need to
Yeah.
work on things.
Yeah.
That's not
Agreed.
someone speaking for Mark, not Sarah speaking for Mark or their marriage counselor speaking for Mark, but Mark saying, I think I need to work on some things individually. We do not see that in Sarah's story. So
Mm-mm.
maybe my quickest answer to your question is probably not.
Yeah.
Probably I wouldn't have worked with him at all.
Yep.
But if there was some evidence that he could see some things he needed to work on, I'd be happy to work with him. But I think it would end up ending around the fact that I don't think he would ever be able to actually own some of
Yeah.
the things that he was seeing
Wow.
fully.
Yeah, that's super helpful as I'm thinking through. I asked myself that question just moments ago in my head, just thinking through, would I have taken Mark as a client? And I think prior to the acts of violence that were demonstrable, recordable,
Right.
but of course, in my previous life, working with criminal corrections, following the second encounter with law enforcement, I would have probably had an opportunity to work with Mark in a very, very different
Yeah, you would
dynamic.
have for sure.
Yeah,
In some kind of a diversion program after he
sure,
got arrested.
sure. So,
Right.
with that being said, if Mark were to come to us for help, either Pastor Dave or the counselor, and had shown a little bit of openness to that, you had mentioned ownership. Can you just help our listeners and our viewers understand a little bit about what repentance looks like, what we're looking for when it comes to a client or a counselee that comes in for
Thanks
help?
for picking up on that cue, Chris. That's I was wanting to get into that for sure because I think that that's pretty important. So, and do you guys have show notes with this? Or is there going to be some version of show notes that can we can put on? If there
Yeah.
is, I can give you that diagram.
Yeah. If you provide us with the diagram, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, but I talk in terms of seeing, owning, hating, and turning as being four aspects of repentance, and I have it depicted in this concentric circle diagram that, like I said, I can send you. You can put it in the show notes for the listeners. But seeing is Mark is able to see the things that he has done, and that list, his list, would be comparable to Sarah's list or even
Sure.
Chloe's list. Like he can see the same things that other people are able to see. Again, that's that perspective taking thing that we talked
Sure.
about before in the self awareness.
Now,
So
to
the
be
deliverable
fair,
of see, what's that?
to be fair, we didn't see any admittance of acknowledgement in Sarah's story. True? Was there ever a glimpse of hope when it came to that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't see anything. But the deliverable there would be that um, he is he is able to come up with a list, literally, of things that I've done. I know I've done this. Man, it was wrong for me to smash that locket. It was wrong for me to have a problem with you saving up $27 to buy a locket for your sister for her birthday.
Right.
Like, if he's able to name those things, that's what I call seeing.
Yeah.
But then he also has to be able to own those things, which is what I mentioned before, which is a lot of times that's where it's like, yeah, Greg, you're right. I did those things. I admit that I did and said those things. But you have to understand that I did those things, out of concern and care for Sarah.
Mm,
Sarah's just
mm,
terrible at managing the money. And so I just know that I can't, you give an inch, they'll take a mile.
wow.
And, I just can't and so he's got a reason, he's got a rationalization, he minimizes, denies, blames, he does everything he can to avoid personal accountability for those things. That's what I'm calling ownership or
Yeah.
not being able to own.
Yeah.
And then hating is the next. It is somewhat sequential, although again, you're always sort of adding new things that they're able to see and hate it. So but it's somewhat of a sequence. So then hating is where they get to the place where like they're able to see that the way God sees it. Man, it was reprehensible. You bought this locket for Chloe. You were so excited to give it to her. And not only did I get mad at you for giving it to her and get mad at you for spending the $27, I smashed it.
Wow.
Like God would be so furious, was so furious when I did that.
Yeah.
Like and to be able to hate it and to be able to see it God's way. And then the turning is new behavior exemplified over time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which means that nobody should be viewed by a human being. I mean, God can obviously do repentance in the snap of a fingers, the blink of an eye. But as far as human beings observing it, we can never declare someone repentant days, weeks after something has happened. It's going to take a period of time to see, does this behavior show up again, maybe in a different way or a different form?
Yeah. Very well said. Thank you for walking us through that, Greg. This is something that's going to take time. It's going to take energy. It takes a great deal of skill and expertise to walk along someone like Mark through that process of seeing, owning, hating, and turning. We're going to come back in a moment to talk a little bit about a therapeutic response. But before we do that, friends, I want to remind you of our sponsor, The Journey and the Process. Sometimes things from our past don't stay in our past. Sometimes hurts linger and wounds need more attention than perhaps we can offer ourselves. If you feel like the past or an experience from the past or a current hurt is impacting you today, please know that healing is possible. Our friends at The Journey and the Process specialize in helping people find freedom from the weight of trauma and difficult experiences. Using methods like EMDR and brain spotting, their teams offer several pathways to healing, including confidential sessions with licensed therapists, trauma-informed biblical counselors, and personal coaches, along with supportive groups. You don't have to carry that weight forever. Start the conversation at thejourneyandtheprocess.com. That's thejourneyandtheprocess.com. Our friends over at The Journey and the Process, Greg.
I do. I was gonna jump in and give a little plug as well. Yeah, they've got an office in North Carolina, but they also have an office in Flower Mound, Texas, which is where my office is.
Yeah.
And so I've worked with several of their counselors, and they're a great organization.
Fantastic.
And
Yeah.
they do many of all those same techniques that you described, or techniques that we use as well. And so I feel very comfortable with what they do. They're a great organization.
Fantastic. So thejourneyandtheprocess.com. They also have done Men of Peace groups with us in the past, which really goes to the heart of our discussion with Mark today, some of those therapeutic or educational responses. So Mark did have a moment, I should say, where he was in a counseling environment, but unfortunately, it was marriage counseling. I want to cue up another section from Sarah's story for you, Greg. This is going to be cue number 2. Let's listen to this, and we'll come back to some of our questions about an abuser using the counseling process.
Great.
He told her that he had done his part and that the rest of the problem was her emotional issues. He said he wasn't the one who needed fixing. She was devastated. Mark's behavior is a classic abuser tactic known by the acronym DARVO: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. He denied his role in the conflict, attacked Sarah's emotional state as the real problem, and reversed the roles, positioning himself as the stable victim of her instability.
So, Greg, I know I can speak for myself, but how often do you see this DARVO playing out in the work that you do, or maybe that you've observed in group work?
All the time.
Okay.
And, a lot of times it does happen in those kinds of settings where, like, a lot of times I remember when I was listening to Sarah's story, one of the things that I really resonated with, and I was like, I just kind of winced, honestly, because it happens so often, is Sarah had so much hope
Yeah.
in the fact that they were going to do marriage counseling. It's not, it's something deep inside her knew that that's not really what
Hmm.
they needed, but it
Right.
was something.
Yeah.
It was a step. And a lot of times, marriage counseling feels that way to folks. And it, if I could just speak to our viewers and our listeners, I really want to hammer home the idea. Marriage counseling is just not indicated in a situation where you have the kinds of things that Mark is doing. And the reason is because of what we're calling here Darvo, that's what's going to happen
Hmm.
in marriage counseling.
Hmm.
I alluded to this earlier, but I knew you were going to go there, so I backed off of it. But um, the idea of like what's going to happen is, Mark is going to be at first so excited about marriage counseling because it's going to be his opportunity to say in front of a counselor, um, she's calling this abuse, but you can really see that she's the one with all the emotional problems
Sure.
here, and I'm just trying to help her out. And then again, because of the trauma, she may show up as more chaotic or
Hmm.
more, troubled or
Hmm.
whatever in
Right.
counseling. And he's going to show up as calm, cool, collected because he knows what he's planning on doing, which is deny, attack, and then reverse the victim and the offender, and make everything about, her behavior. And we call that sometimes counselors call that triangulation even.
Yeah.
So he's going to try to see if he can get the counselor over onto his side in terms of like, yeah, the one that really needs all the work here is Sarah.
Yeah.
And then what happens is as soon as that doesn't seem to be working, then he doesn't want to do marriage counseling anymore because she's the one. It's like, we've got a counselor. I've come in and I've told the counselor what all the problems are. Now you need to keep seeing the counselor and work on your problems.
Wow.
I don't have any problems,
Wow.
so I don't need to come. And that's exactly what happened
It
there.
really is, and he even hijacked the counseling in a way, and utilized some of the language, which is the question I wanted to lean into here. He basically claims that Sarah's emotional instability, what you might have identified in passing just now as trauma responses, were really the problem. And so, how do we? I don't know if we really can prevent abusive people from going there, but how do we address abusive folks when they learn therapy speak or theological language in our programs and counseling, and then just become more sophisticated with their control?
Yeah, and that's always, I mean, that's the $10 million. It's probably even I could probably even value it higher than that question. In the work that you and I do, Chris,
Yeah.
is uh, by you're going to have to do the work, you're going to have to name some things,
Mm,
and you're going to have to be able to try to help them see these dynamics. But what you don't want to do is have it be where a good abusive person just becomes a more educated abusive person. By good, I mean someone who's good at
good
being
at,
abusive,
yep.
which is not good, right? And and they get to the place where they're like able to name those things and put that all on the other person. So the way I try to do that is I mean, and you're right, there is no way, I mean, people just have to know at the outset if they're going to try to do some work in counseling in a group like Men of Peace, they're going to have to face the possibility that when these dynamics are named, they may be reversed onto the victim.
Yeah.
And that's just another clue of what's really going on here when that happens. But what we try to do in the Men of Peace groups that I've led and coached, in the sessions that I've done with men, what I try to do is I just say, we're here to talk about you. We're not talking about her. She's not here. Now, again, in a marriage counseling setting, she is here, and that's the problem.
Right.
That's what
Right.
makes it hard to actually do the kind of counseling that needs to happen in marriage counseling. But in individual counseling with someone like Mark or in a Men of Peace group, Sarah's not here. We're here to work on you. So we're not interested in how you think she may have done some of these things. We're interested in how you may have done those things.
Mm.
And so we're going to try to get him back onto the seeing, owning, hating, turning, um, you know, uh, train, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and keep him focused on him.
Yeah.
Again, if he's not able to do that, it probably means that there's not a lot of hope for change for him, at least right now.
Yeah.
There's always hope for change down the road, depending on whatever the Lord and the Holy Spirit does. But right now, in this particular Men of Peace group or in this particular course of counseling, um, I would probably say if we see him doing that, and if he just can't get off of continuing to go to her, um, there's probably no hope for change for
Mm.
him because he's still trying to do the Darvo thing
Right.
of making it all about her. Instead, we want to try to keep him focused on him and focused on his work and the work that he needs to do. But in order to do that, he's got to be able to see the work that he needs to
Wow.
do.
So let me turn on a dime maybe in for just a moment, Greg, because this, as you're talking, it reminded me that some of our Peace Interrupted listeners and viewers, they may not be as familiar with you and I and the work that we've been doing for a long time together. Could you walk us through just quickly, and I'll be happy to ping pong that a little bit with you. When we talk about things like Men of Peace, what is Men of Peace, and then how do we utilize that, say, in counseling, coaching, and groups?
That's a great question. I would love to address and also get your thoughts on. So, um, Men of Peace is our um, effort to create a batter intervention type program that is very gospel centric and that is focused on the Lord. That's like based on Christian biblical principles,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a program of varying lengths depending on the particular program and the particular way that it's done in a certain context. Um, it can be as short as 12 or 13 weeks. It can be longer than that. But it's a group program that's led by a couple of facilitators. Both of us tend to prefer co-facilitators that are like one male and one female.
Yeah.
So, mixed gender facilitators, not
Right.
mixed gender groups.
Right.
All the
All the participants are men.
participants are men. And that's just because it's helpful to have a woman's perspective in the room. It's also helpful to see a man and a woman working together
Yeah.
peacefully towards a goal. I think that that's just a nice thing to model. Um, and, in the Men of Peace groups, to your point, you said this earlier, you might focus an entire
Mm-hmm.
session on isolation, or you might focus an entire session on how men have minimized and blamed and denied and avoided accountability, and therefore they're not able to get to the owning
Mm-hmm.
phase of repentance. You might have we have whole sessions on repentance itself and what that looks like
Right.
and what that means and what turning means and what new behavior looks like compared and contrasted to old behavior. And so it is a program that's primarily an education-based program in the sense that like they're going to learn some things, and even to the point that we made earlier, Chris, they're going to learn some things that they can weaponize.
Right.
The reality is, and listeners, viewers, please pay attention to this, abusive people who are not going to change, they will learn how to weaponize everything.
Yeah.
So, you're going to find yourself often in a quote no-win situation where the win is that he might be able to see his abuse and be able to own that just looking at himself without focusing on her. That's the win, and you'll be in a no-win situation where that's not going to happen because he is constantly weaponizing it.
Wow.
But back to Men of Peace, the hope is that through education and through accountability, and again, the group dynamic of the other men is extremely important there, that they will be able to see and own and hate and eventually turn from and make changes to their behavior.
Yeah. So what we've done is worked for many years and tested it out in different ways of building out a curriculum and a structure that we can take guys through. If you're listening today and you're a pastor, a church leader, or a counselor, or even if you're in Mark's shoes, a couple resources I'd recommend for you, beginning with menofpeace.org, and you'll learn a lot there from the work that Greg and I have done. The Men of Peace podcast, which is a podcast where Greg and I have these discussions every week. And then for pastors and leaders, my book, The Heart of Domestic Abuse, would probably be a good resource in that vein as well. Men of Peace is typically designed to be done in a counseling, coaching, or group environment. And you mentioned batterer intervention. This is really something Mark would be a good candidate for, would be BIP or PIP. And those are state, county, community-based responses to domestic abuse. Would you be willing to share a bit about your experiences with BIPs? I know I've led them for years, but it'd be helpful to hear how a clinician has utilized them.
Yeah, I haven't led BIP groups. In my context here, you can voluntarily, apply to be in a group. Sometimes you can't do that, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, as we alluded to earlier, you've got to come in some way through the criminal justice system and the court system and be
Right.
referred as a court-ordered diversion approach. But in my area, a person can join a BIPS group voluntarily. So the ways that I've worked with it is either they have been court ordered and they've done BIPS and then they've come to me from that, or maybe even while they're in BIPS, so they're still doing a group, but now they're coming to some individual counseling. Or if it's a guy like Mark, I would probably say, hey, I can't really help you with what I'm seeing right now. But what I would recommend is that you go to the local BIP group. I would give them that information. A guy like Mark is probably not going to go, if we're being honest,
Right.
but it is an option for him. It's a secular program, but it is a way where these dynamics are going to be talked about, and maybe just another, sometimes it's just and this is as a clinician, there was for a while, the other thing that happens in BIP groups, I think that we should just point out is that there is a lot of times there's turnover. You were leading the same group with the same co-leader for a long period of time. That's actually pretty unusual in my experience.
Right.
Sometimes there's turnover. Um, but for a while, there was a group facilitator around here that I was like, even if I was seeing somebody individually, it was a lady.
Yeah.
She did the group by herself, and man, I mean, she was really great.
Yeah.
I heard lots of quotes from BIP from guys, who were like, man, just the way that she put it, and the fact that she was female
Right.
and able to say that. So also just a quick word. I know we're probably wrapping up, but
Yeah.
just a quick word. If you're thinking, man, I don't know, a male and a female leader in a perpetrator group, or even a female counselor, we've got female counselors in my practice that also see men. If you're thinking he would never do that, or that would never work with my husband or with this person, it can. And I think it can even sometimes be more effective than a guy like me and Chris talking to a guy. Not that, I mean, I don't think we're ineffective, but I think that, like, there is something about that female perspective that can be really helpful. So don't in your mind just assume that this has to all be, that the help always has to come from men.
Yeah. Very, very good. I can say, having worked in this field for 20 years as well, and 17 of those years deliberately in a BIP group, just every Tuesday with men, has been super beneficial to me as a person, sharpening me and sharpening my skill, and helping me become, I think, a better husband and father and pastor and neighbor. There's no guarantees. It's certainly not a magic formula. It's a tremendous amount of hard work, whether it's batterer intervention or Men of Peace. But if you're listening or watching and you find yourself resonating with Mark's story, we would love for you to visit menofpeace.org. You know, as we do land the plane for today, Greg, I would love to invite you to just spend some time talking to our audience. Maybe there's a Sarah in our audience today who resonates so much with the story that we're attempting to tell and the help that we're attempting to give. Is there any words of hope or caution or encouragement that you'd like to give to victims and survivors who might be tuning in to Peace Interrupted?
Oh, I would love to do that. Sarah, if you are watching, and maybe whether your name's Sarah or not, but if you're a Sarah and you're watching or listening, I think it's so important for you to understand that there is hope for change, and that at the same time change is long and slow, and takes a lot of it takes a lot of humility and a lot of self-awareness and a lot of work on behalf of the other for the other person to be doing not you but your spouse or your partner, or this other person. And that is, so you have to ask yourself the question, is he willing to do this? Do I see him as willing to do this? And like I said earlier, that work is in specific contexts. So marriage counseling may feel like it is something that would give a lot of hope, but it really will not give hope. It will only
Yeah.
be a dead end in a situation where there is this kind of abuse. He really needs to do his own work at least first.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there can't be marriage counseling down the road. And to this Sarah or potential Sarah out there, I'm not saying that you're not a sinner. So I know you're not hearing that. But I am saying that, like, it is not your sin that has caused this particular dynamic. It's his sin.
Yeah.
And so he needs to do that work in group. He needs to do that work individually. And then there might be hope for marriage counseling. I do want you to know that there's hope either way. On either side, there is healing for the trauma that you have experienced, and that God is big enough and good enough to give you the grace that is going to be sufficient for this journey that
Yeah.
you found yourself unwillingly on.
Wow. Thank you, brother. We really appreciate you, Greg, and your wisdom and your friendship. Where can folks find you or find out about you, or what resources would you like to just take a minute to plug to our listeners?
SoulCareAssociates.com is the website for my practice. Soul, SOUL, careassociates.com. And we're in Texas, so all of our clinicians are licensed in Texas. So as far as counseling, it's going to have to be, if you're in Texas, we can help you. If you're not in Texas, we don't have anyone that's licensed, unfortunately, outside of Texas. And it is the licensure is governed by the state that you're in. We're working on some changes to that at some point. I also do church consulting though, and I can do that anywhere in the country. So if you're a pastor or a ministry leader and you'd like some help, again, you can find me at soulcareassociates.com. The book When Home Hurts that I co-wrote with Jeremy Pierre. There's also a website for that, whenhomehurts.com, which is a fantastic book, I think, for church leaders to get you a little bit down the road in terms of like how to know how to care in these situations better. And then, of course, the book that I contributed to that Chris edited, Caring for Families Caught in Domestic Abuse, is also a fantastic resource. So,
Wow. Thanks, buddy. Hey, and thank you, listeners, viewers, for being on the journey with us, for taking part in Peace Interrupted. All that we ask is, would you be willing to rate, review, subscribe, follow, whatever the platform you're listening or watching on asks you to do? It helps us at the podcast. It also helps others find the podcast. And would you be willing to share this link, whether audio or video, with a friend, a pastor, a counselor who may need it? And of course, we would love for you to share Sarah's story so that more folks can become aware of the dangers of coercive control. We also want to thank The Journey and the Process for being our season sponsor. You can learn more about them at thejourneyandtheprocess.com. That's thejourneyandtheprocess.com. Thank you, Greg, for being part of Peace Interrupted.
my pleasure to be, featured on this inaugural season
Yeah.
of Peace Interrupted. I'm excited. So thanks for having me as always.
Awesome.